contact is a spontaneous creative process. When the excitant and percipient come together, it's a spontaneous creative process.
It's not made to happen. You don't do it. You don't force it. It just...
No, you don't make it. I've challenged people. People talk about making contact. I don't believe you make contact. It occurs spontaneously under the right conditions when the excitation can be accurately perceived. I don't think you can make contact any more than you can make love. Love is a spontaneous, natural process. It happens or it doesn't.
Mm.
Nietzsche knew that. I'll paraphrase him, but Nietzsche said, love is a spontaneous emotion. You can't promise to love someone forever. You can promise to act as if you do. Now, the romantics are not going to want to hear Nietzsche.
No.
Welcome to In Contact with the ACO. I'm Dr. Chris Burritt. I'm happy to say it's been 1 year of podcasting. Thank you to all who have made suggestions, provided encouragement, and participated in helping to put it together. If you're interested in attending one of our live events or webinar presentations, you can meet the doctors and join in on the discussion afterwards. You can connect with us and learn more at adifferentkindofpsychiatry.com or orgonomy.org. Stay tuned for details about our online events and for more for when we will resume in person at the ACO campus near Princeton, New Jersey. This episode features an interview with Peter Crist M.D. I sit down with him to learn more about social orgonomy. What is it, and how does it apply to doctors working with patients in therapy, as well as to others in their work and love lives? You'll hear references to an event that sadly did not occur secondary to the pandemic, but we'll do what we can to get this knowledge out when possible in one form or another.
The ACO is hosting a social orgonomy event and the focus is on work. This sounds very different than the psychiatric case presentations, but from what I've heard you say before, there's a lot of similarities. So maybe you could just say, what is social orgonomy, and help the listener understand what that means.
Okay. So if we just start with the simple definition of orgonomy is the science of man's relationship with nature. So social orgonomy is how that science applies to the interactions between people, both the healthy and the pathological aspects, and how that plays out in families, in organizations, and politically, even political entities.
So is social orgonomy broader than medical orgonomy?
So that's a question that's very it's not simple to answer that question, and the reason is that orgonomy started in the medical field, its roots in psychoanalysis and helping people with their individual problems. And early on, when Reich was developing his approach with character analysis, he began to ask the question, so why do people end up neurotic? And it quickly goes back to the family. And so if you start looking at the family, you're in the realm of social interactions. So the social realm is really broader than the individual psychological realm. But where orgonomy has ended up is looking at the biological basis of all of that, which is an even deeper, broader realm. So one of the ways I think about it is orgonomy has largely been centered on medical orgonomy, and the case presentation series have been illustrating the medical treatment of individual emotional problems. But social orgonomy is where we take many of those principles and then start looking more broadly about what happens beyond the individual in terms of their relationships, in terms of their interactions with other people. And obviously, if you're working with an individual, everybody has relationships, from love relationships to work relationships. So we have to take that into account. But if I were to separate it out, medical ergonomy is the discipline that focuses on helping people make better contact with themselves, to really be in touch with their emotions, their sensations. Social ergonomy is really the discipline of looking at how people make contact with each other and helping them make better contact in their interactions with other people.
Could I ask you to explain a little bit more? So you used the word contact, and the name of the podcast is In Contact with the ACO.
Right.
For listeners who have heard that term but maybe aren't as familiar, how would you describe that word a little bit more?
Okay. Contact, literally, the literal definition from its origin is con means with, tact means to touch. So we use that term in ergonomy in a much broader meaning, that in contact, when we're talking about it, means always has two components: perception and excitation. And to not get too lost in the theory of it, when we make contact with our own emotions, we are accurately perceiving the excitation of that emotional reaction in our body. And so when you talk about contact with yourself, it's, are you accurately perceiving the energy that moves in an emotional way, or are you accurately perceiving the energy that moves in a sensory way? So you can have sensory contact, you can have emotional contact. And those two principles of excitation and perception apply in the social realm in a way that has been absolutely useful and helpful in all of my work with couples and family relationships and business relationships. At any particular moment in time, one person embodies the excitation, is the excitant. The other person, for contact to occur, has to be perceiving that other person's excitation. And in common parlance, if one person's talking a lot, the other person's not listening, there is not communication, there's not contact. So looking at where that interaction between people gets interrupted and blocked is a lot of the work that I do in the social realm. It's absolutely fundamental. So if two people are excited and no one's perceiving the other one, it prevents the spontaneous contact from occurring. So in one of the business interactions that I've addressed, one person was, as the salesperson, was constantly trying to get the other person to buy.
To make a sale.
Make a sale. And that's the whole thing that so often happens, is people think, well, I got to make this happen. My advice to them was, you've got to just listen to the potential buyer. And it's any good sales training knows these things instinctively, but we are able to apply some specific functional theory and knowledge that it's absolutely clear that you could stop talking but still not be perceiving, and the connection wouldn't happen. So it's not a mechanical thing of how much excitation, how much perception. It's whether those two people actually get together.
I see. And so you work with businesses and individuals with their work lives, and then you're involved in the social ergonomy training program. So maybe just stepping back a little bit. So social ergonomy, you mentioned using that in your medical practice, but you don't have to be a doctor to use social ergonomy. Is that accurate?
That's accurate, yes. Yeah. So the people in our training program, none of them are in the social ergonomy training program at the College of Orgonomy, none of them are doctors. They range from an attorney to people in business to educational counselors. So these principles that apply out in the work world can be used and applied by people who are not physicians, obviously. And what we're finding is more of the medical ergonomists are realizing greater knowledge about how these interactions happen between people are extremely useful in developing their interactions between doctor and patient. That's a social interaction with a specific function of healing the patient.
So I'm interested just to learn a little bit more about the trainees involved in the social ergonomy program, how they're using this knowledge in their business life or in the social realm. Do you have any examples?
Yeah. So one of the other basic principles in social ergonomy to me is that every relationship has a particular primary function. So Wilhelm Reich said, love, work, and knowledge are the well springs of our life. They should also govern it. So those two things of love and work are the basic categories of all of our relationships. So if someone is working with someone else, it's very important to be clear about, is your function one of producing whatever this work relation is supposed to be about, or are you just there to have fun? And so everybody says, well, you want to have fun while you're working, and that's why I come back to every relationship has both work and love functions. And when I give presentations on this, I love asking the audience, anybody in a marriage, and people say yes, and I'll say, is that a love relationship or a work relationship? I'll get sort of a confused look. I said, well, the primary function is love. But then I asked them, does anybody find it takes work to maintain a marriage? And like a moment of confusion, everybody pretty much raises their hand and says yes. So that aspect of being clear about the function of the relationship is very important. And so in the company that I consult with recently, the fellow who had taken on revitalizing and reorganizing the sales team told me that after their annual sales planning meeting, someone who was there as a consultant helping them with their sales training said, your salespeople love their clients. And he said to me, I thought back, and before the sales team had turned around and wasn't functioning well, you never had that feeling that the salespeople loved their clients. So that's a perfect example that if the sales team loves their clients, they're far more likely to have that client want to get together with them, want to make contact, want to buy something from them. And once that shift in the whole quality of the sales force changed, the love aspect of that work relationship came to the fore and absolutely supported it. So in a good work relationship, the love will support the work. In a good love relationship, the work will support the love.
Yeah, that sounds, like in direct contrast with the way, some people stereotypically think of salespeople, like looking for the mark to make the sale. So it sounds like when they were able to see their clients as someone they had a relationship with and wanted to help, that helped change the way they looked at things. And wow.
Exactly. And this fellow made the point that someone who had come back from having been on leave was the only one left on the sales force that looked at her clients as her possessions. They're my clients. I don't want someone else to work with them rather than these are people I have a relationship with. Yeah.
Hmm. And so that's with one business, and you mentioned that there's trainees who are using the information and their work lives too. Uh,
Yes.
what have
Yeah.
you seen them do?
So one of the um, people who will be presenting at our April 4th event is she owns property and is a landlord. And once she got absolutely clear about her role as a landlord, that that was her function, she was able to let go of some of the other confusing things of wanting to be more friendly with the tenants. And it wasn't that she was no longer friendly, but she had, in a sense, lost sight of that her function was simply to be their landlord, and the other things were secondary. So she was able to look at that whole question of what is the primary function of the relationship. I won't give away the specific details because it's a wonderful example that I hope people will be able to come and hear that example. Another basic principle along those same lines. One of the people presenting owns rehabilitation facilities. They're actually long-term residential care facilities for people with disabilities and various medical conditions. And he instinctively has that sense of looking at each person as an individual human being. And because he worked with just seeing people, a minor example that just tells so much about how he worked is that he realized not everybody wants to get up at 7 in the morning for breakfast. So he had an absolutely individual meal plan with people that they would get their meals when it was best for them to get their meals, and the level of satisfaction, the decrease in complaints was dramatic
Wow.
with that. Yeah.
Wow.
No, and this is all reminding me another key concept in orgonomy that comes from medical orgonomy is the understanding that we all have three layers of our emotional structure: a core, a secondary layer, and a facade, what I call the nature, the character, and the personality. And in organizations, I am absolutely clear the same thing is true, that every organization has a core function that develops spontaneously to provide some need in society. It's what typically gets called the mission, but mission has such an intellectual, sort of moralistic term that I really like our term core function, that what is the natural process going on in the organization, and then it develops a character that traditionally is called the corporate culture, and then it has an image over top of that. So this fellow Dan Gregory, who owns the residential care facilities, in my tutoring with him, what I kept focusing on is what is the core function of your businesses, and what became very clear is the specific thing that makes his business in some ways unique from others is he has always seen that he is there to try to help people live their lives more fully despite their medical problems and despite their disabilities. And so as we talked about it, I said, so every time you focus with your staff on what is the core function of this organization, um, it will help them really be connected with what this is all about. And he said, wow, that's even going to change how I hire people. He said, nobody likes emptying bedpans. I mean, but if they can see that that serves a greater function of helping people live their lives more fully, they can manage to do that without so many worker complaints of, God, I hate this job, and
Yeah.
that whole thing, which dovetails with that same three layers. Is when I'm working with individuals, I'm always looking at what is that person's specific work nature. So some people by nature are very sensitive, some people by nature are very outgoing, some people by nature are very talkative. And each of those qualities can play out in how they do their work. And so I believe work satisfaction comes from people being able to discharge that natural impulse that comes from their work nature. And the extent to which somebody can do that will give them satisfaction, whether it's in a job or the specific job description, if there is an outlet for our particular way of doing things. So with Dan, it was clear he loves helping people, and so once his business was doing better, I think he attributes some of it as just his natural abilities, but also just being able to focus it more clearly with what he learned in our training program. He then he sold one of his businesses, and then he was saying, all right, now I have some money. How can I help people? That was his impulse. That
Yeah.
might be someone else's, but that was his impulse. So he will now potentially find satisfaction having an outlet for his desire to help people in some field entirely different from running an extended care residential facility.
Wow. Do you have any general ideas about the modern kind of workplace? And it seems people have been more dissatisfied with their work lives maybe than ever before. I don't know if that's true. I'm younger, but um, um, it sounds like that's part of what this program and you and the trainees are trying to do is help people be more satisfied. But um, I don't know if it's the way the media portrays it, but it seems like people are dissatisfied with their work a lot of times. Are there any things that stand out just from your work or from your general knowledge?
Um, yes, and my experience is obviously not a general survey of how things are, but overall, I get a sense that there is a problem with satisfaction primarily because of the tendency for work organizations to be mechanical and not have genuine connections happen. And so when I use the term contact, I'm talking about genuine connections where there is that connection people have with their work, with uh, something productive. And I can't remember the exact details, but I ran across a number of years ago, I was looking up um, the characteristics of millennials in terms of their work life. And one of the things that the older generation kept complaining, well, they just want to do what they want to do. They won't follow orders. And this person had the whatever you want to call it, the insight to say, well, that's actually a positive thing, is that the millennials are not interested in just approaching work as a mechanical thing. They want to understand, do I have a purpose here? What is my connection? And so the extent to which jobs become disconnected from feeling like you've made a difference is going to increase the level of dissatisfaction. Yeah.
I've heard that too, and I like that you say that because I think as a generation, millennials kind of get the shortchanged. But I've heard that too, and it makes a lot of sense that you want to have a purpose and you want to feel that you're accomplishing something and not just showing up and being another cog in the wheel.
Right, right. The company that I consult with in New Zealand is an outdoor postering company, and when they brought me over for a week of work with them when they were in a major transition period, and there's an exercise that I do of looking at positions, roles, and functions, and a position is like the job title. A role is what someone is assigned to do. And when we talk in Orgonomy about functional approach, I look at the function as what the actual effect is, not what the intention is, not what the assigned role is, but what the actual effect is. And so I was meeting with the whole group of people in this company. Some of them are the guys who go out and glue up the posters on a wall. And so I asked each of them to describe their positions, roles, and functions. He said, my position is poster hanger. My role is to get the posters up there. And I said, well, what's your function? What is the effect of that? And he said, well, I get the job done. But I said, but more broadly, what if you didn't do that? He said, well, the company would lose business. I said, that's right. And if the company lost more business, he said, I guess the company would fail. And I said, what would be the effect of that? He said, I'd be out of a job and 50 other people would be out of a job. And he sort of stopped and said, oh my God, I had no idea I was that important. So just helping people see the function they have in the bigger picture of a company is part of what I think can bring satisfaction, but that just doesn't happen enough.
Yeah. You know, I'm thinking of an example, and tell me, did you ever see either the TV show Suits or Mad Men?
I saw Mad Men. Yeah, I've never seen Suits. Yes.
Well, it's funny, I don't know if what it says, but there's like a beautiful redhead who's, I think, like the administrative
Right.
executive assistant of some kind.
Right.
But, you know, in some senses, she's a secretary, but you can tell from watching that show that she has a much larger function in the entire company.
Yes.
Does that?
Yes. Very good. Yeah, that's exactly what I help people look at is so your role might be your title might be secretary, your role might be answering phones and organizing schedules, but as so often happens in companies, there is often a secretary who has a much deeper and broader and more important function, which is really being either the eyes and ears of the executive that she works for, or the one who is in touch with, I mean, often that kind of person is the office that workers go to complain or whatever. And so often, and it's often a woman, often she is the one who knows exactly what's going on in the company and can help the president of the company see how to deal with things. So yes, that's a great example of the difference between a role and a function. I love word roots, and position just means the point that somebody is. Role literally comes from a rolled up piece of paper that was given to an actor, assigning them the character they were to play. That's where the word role comes.
Wow.
It's
I didn't know
it's the
that.
assignment, yeah, you're made. And function has a very broad, deep root that goes way back that actually means to discharge something, to enjoy. So it even has roots that if you're functioning well, it has something to do with things happening naturally.
Wow. Yeah, I don't think most people think of function with those word roots and with those. Yeah. Wow.
You
And so that makes sense. So we talk about a functional approach, and that's what you
Yeah,
mean,
that
whether it means, you know, in someone's individual life and their emotional life, or with their discharge of work functions.
right,
Um,
right, right.
wow.
So in looking at that question, when you say a functional approach, one of the key things with orgonomy is the understanding that things in nature happen spontaneously. So That's what we're looking at, is what is the actual spontaneous effect of this person, or what they've done. And that's why I say it's not what somebody says, their intentions, but the actual effect that matters. And when I told that in one of my consulting sessions with a company, the guy had the insight to say, God, if people applied that to politics, that would make a difference. So these basic principles that apply in work relationships, yes, social ergonomy looks much more broadly at the whole question of what's going on politically.
My sense is good politicians know that and use their intentions to hide what they're actually trying to do or what
Yes,
they
yes,
assume will happen. Yeah.
fortunately. And that's why when I'm talking with people and you doing that exercise of positions, roles, and functions, I will say you can define a position, you can define a role, but you can't define a function. You can only identify it by what actually happens. So you have to observe in order to see what the function is. And that function can either be positive for the organization or negative for the organization, positive for the relationship or negative for the relationship. And in my work with couples, which is another area of social ergonomy, over and over I will hear somebody say, yeah, but I didn't mean that, you know. And I use the example of you're walking along, a brick falls on your head, and the guy says, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to knock that off on your head. It still hurts. Now,
Very
what you
true.
do with if somebody did mean to do that, you need to deal with it differently than if they didn't. So
Yeah. Wow.
let me give you one other example, going from what a function can, a natural function can be, or a negative effect. So in the company that I work with, they had someone, the one I was talking about before with the sales force that had been turned around. Someone had been out on leave and came back after a year of leave, and they had sensed that she was the one who looked at her clients as her clients as possessions rather than people that she had relationships with. And so she came back, and had a palpably negative attitude that just spilled over into the whole team, to the point that nobody really wanted to work with her. And in fact, she then went behind the back of one of the other sales women and started calling the clients she used to have that had been assigned to this new person.
Oh,
And
wow.
so there was a confrontation between them, and she then accused the person who'd come back from leave accused the other woman of bullying her, which is a very significant charge. And fairly quickly, I was able to help the managing partners that I do the consulting with see this as an example of what we call the emotional plague, where someone's intolerance to the positive feelings, she has to go and destroy the other person's productive work. And so this ended up being a very clear example of that whole process, that somebody who's dissatisfied with their work situation can either have a neurotic reaction and suffer in misery with that dissatisfaction, or they can have what we would call an emotional plague reaction, where they try to tear down the other person who is being more successful satisfied than they are. And this was an example of the second. And from our knowledge in orgonomy, there are only two ways to treat that. One is to expose the destructive motives or to quarantine it. The reason it's called emotional plague is that negative emotional, destructive emotional reaction can infect someone else to also be destructive in the situation. So you have to use a medical approach of quarantining that infection. And it's so timely right now with what's been going on with the coronavirus, of understanding in the emotional realm there is the equivalent. And we need to use medical. It's not a moral slam at the person that they're an evil person. It's a true emotional medical condition that we can diagnose, that this person, instead of handling their own destructive impulses that come from their character, is acting them out in the social realm. And so we need to recognize it, diagnose it accurately, and then quarantine it, or, as I said, expose the motive. So sometimes in this kind of situation, getting the person to express or discharge whatever all that negative, destructive impulse is the equivalent of lancing a boil and letting the pus out. Sometimes the person can turn around then. This case, it's too early to know for sure, but my guess is probably will not. And the only choice is to quarantine her and remove her from the organization. And the managing partner who I consult with was insightful enough to say, look, I think the infection started before this woman. It was in the sales team beforehand, that cynical, negative attitude about the whole sales process. And he named a particular person he thought might have been carrying it, that it had taken them 3 years to fire him. Now, within 2 weeks of this woman coming back, there was this, I believe it's the equivalent of an inflammatory reaction where the whole organization flared up because it was healthy enough to say, we don't want this negative attitude. We need to get rid of her. Whereas before, she had been working in that earlier sales team for several years, and it had not seemed to be a problem. So again, that understanding of the biological equivalence is part of what orgonomy and social orgonomy can bring to looking at work-related problems. That inflammatory reaction is, I think, functionally absolutely equivalent to a biological inflammatory reaction of something that is seen as no longer serving the function of the whole organization and the whole organism. Yeah.
That sounds invaluable to employees and employers to
Yeah.
have that kind of information.
Yes, yeah, because the consultant they had was advising them, well, bring her back, maybe they can work it out. But it's interesting in our work with disturbed relationships in social ergonomy, we want to turn that pair of excitant and percipient into an attractive connection so that contact is made. But if it's an emotional plague situation, you want to do the opposite, is remove it. So the consultant was advising bring her back, and I told them, stick to your instincts that this woman is going to be destructive and there is no working that out. And the managing partner said to me, he said, I was wavering, and I'm glad you, I actually, in between the week of consulting with him, I sent him an email advising him, don't try to engage her. But, you need to keep a strict quarantine until you see what's going on legally with the situation. And he said, I was wavering. I'm glad you told me that because I know that's right. But that's another feature we know about that destructive tendency, is it causes confusion and immobilization in the healthy people. So when you find yourself confused and immobilized about what's going on, you need to immediately suspect you may be dealing with that kind of situation.
So if you could just say again, just so that it's clear, what is an emotional plague reaction? Just because I think this is an entirely new term and I just want to be clear.
Okay, yeah. Um, so, and if I can use a simple example of someone who is unhappy in their own love life, walks through the park and sees a young couple kissing and showing obvious, genuine affection for each other. A neurotic reaction would be for that person to go home and suffer with their own limitations. An emotional plague reaction would be that person going to the city council and having them pass a law against public displays of infection. Public, that's a great slip. Public displays of affection. So, so the problem is in that situation, as the person's intolerance to being stirred up by something else that's exciting gets projected onto the environment. So their impulse is to, someone suffering from an emotional plague reaction, instead of suffering inside themselves, will try to stop the source of excitement outside themselves. And as soon as they infect someone else to help perpetuate that, you know it's infected someone else, and it's an emotional plague reaction. But the basic, I mean, I think we've all had that reaction. We just wake up on the wrong side of the bed, feeling bad. We go in, and other people are happy and having a good time at work, and we want to just smash them. Well, that's the underlying basis of the emotional plague reaction. So someone who suffers with that impulse to want to smash them is a neurotic reaction. Someone who actually acts it out is an emotional plague reaction.
Ah. Thank you. That helps clarify things. And it infects other people.
Right. Right. And the basis for that, we understand, is that unfortunately the majority of people are not fully satisfied in their love and their work lives. And so there's all this pent-up energy that either you have to shut down neurotically or it gets acted out in an emotional plague reaction. And so, in major cases of it, one person will infect another to, it's what happened in Nazi Germany, it's what happened in communist Russia, where there's a full-blown epidemic of destructiveness.
Everything from a kid in a playground to world wars, basically.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's part of why it's a difficult concept, is it covers such a range, but the underlying mechanism is that one of, I'm having a bad day, I go in, see people happy, and I want to smash them. Now, if I get someone else to help me smash them, then I've infected that person.
Wow.
But it is very common. I mean, if you really start listening to people, I mean, most work politics has an element of that. I, have had a number of my private patients who have been in academia, and for whatever reason, the academic environment is rife with, it's called academic jealousy, but it's that destructive tendency. My patient's sons just got appointed to a new position in an academic institution, and he was up for tenure. Everybody gave him absolutely glowing reports except this one guy who clearly could not tolerate the fact that this young guy was the brilliant star that was doing things this other guy had tried to do in his younger days but was never able to do. That's a classic example. It's not just any longer academic jealousy. He then goes to the tenure committee to say why this guy shouldn't be given tenure.
Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah, I think most people do see that, in their lives and movies and media. I think um, it's something we've all seen and known, but we're putting a better understanding to it. It sounds like it.
Right. That's right. I mean, people instinctively understand it. I mean, J.K. Rowling's understood it clearly in the Harry Potter books. I mean, Harry Potter's parents were killed by Voldemort, who could not tolerate his parents having the love they did and the love they did for Harry. I mean, it's right there
Yeah.
described in almost the same terms we use without using the same words that we do.
Well, this is wonderful. This is a lot of great insights. And before we stop, are there anything else that you think is important for the listener to hear?
Um, I just hope the listener will look into more what the question of what is orgonomy and learn about it, and beyond that, what is social orgonomy? Because we didn't even, I mean, it's such an explosive area. There's knowledge about social ergonomy that helps us understand the character basis of what's going on politically too. And that's too much to try to get into now, but it's a whole field. I see social ergonomy basically having three major areas. One is working with families and couples. The other is working in work relationships, work organizations. The other is about sociopolitics, and the
Mhm.
college is addressing all three of those areas. Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Yep. Thank you.
I always enjoy speaking with Dr. Crist, and this interview was no different. I learned quite a bit. Did you learn anything? Have any thoughts or feelings come up for you after listening to this interview? I'll tell you a thought I have. This interview was done in March, and I'm sitting here in July, amazed at how much has changed so quickly. I'm wondering, how can we spread this knowledge to help society deal with the current socio-political situation? How can we help people look at themselves and their situations, including their social environment, functionally? We are interested in your questions and comments. You can connect with us at adifferentkindofpsychiatry.com or orgonomy.org. If you like our work, be sure to leave a favorable rating, review, and share with a friend. The best way to help the ACO spread its knowledge is by letting others know about us. Find more episodes at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get podcasts. 1 year down and many more to come. We will continue to release a new episode every month. I'm Dr. Chris Burritt. Thank you for listening to In Contact with the ACO. Since 1968, the psychiatrists affiliated with the American College of Orgonomy have been helping patients discover greater satisfaction, health, and overall well-being in their lives, whether patients suffer with mental illness, struggle with addiction, or feel unsatisfied with their work lives or relationships. Medical orgone therapy, as practiced by the physicians at the ACO, offers a way forward, often without the use of medication.